Hello all and welcome to how to create your own stock analysis report to find its intrinsic value. The topic of this video came as a request from Jerry and Argosun, so I hope you find it useful. Before we start, I want to mention that this video is not financial advice and is for entertainment purposes only. Creating the whole report from scratch takes more time than I want to dedicate for this video, so we will go over all what you need to know to build the report, and we will take one financial statement element as an example. There are 6 steps more or less to create this report. First, we need to decide the source of data that we will be using to feed into this report. I usually use the annual report or the 10K report. This report is prepared by the publicly traded company and filed with the SEC. For example, this is the UPS 2022 annual report. I will make a separate video showing how to find these reports. The next step is to decide the time period that this report is covering. I usually do 8 years, but you are the boss of your report and you can decide to cover as many years as you want. The third step is we need to decide which financial statement, if not all of them, and which items or elements of each financial statement we will be using. We can break down the items that we will be using as either directly involved in the analysis, or we needed to calculate a certain ratio, and that ratio is the one directly involved in the analysis. For example, we don't care about the income tax expense, or if we scroll down, the depreciation and amortization expense, but we need them to calculate EBITDA. And we need EBITDA to find times interest earned ratio that help us to find a solvency of a company. Usually, we will need to use some ratios for each financial statements. Generally, there are 5 main categories of financial ratios, and they are liquidity ratios, leverage ratios, efficiency ratios, profitability ratios, and market value ratios. It takes some time and reading to slowly familiarize yourself with the financial ratios and the purpose of each one, so you can choose the ratios that helps you the best to have the right calculations and analysis for this report. The fourth step is the data entry, and I recommend that you enter all the data in one sheet and let it flow to the other sheets. This will allow you to use the same data in more than one sheet without the need of re-entering it again. For example, I entered the revenue item for the past 8 years, and I will fetch this data in every sheet that I will need the revenue. Once we are satisfied with the data that we have, we should start working on the presentation part. I'm a visual learner, so I like to see graphs, and I'm sure there are many other people feel the same way, because it's easier and more obvious to find trends. Let's take the revenue as an example. Most graphs have 2 axes, and we need to list the years as one of the axes. And as we mentioned earlier, we should not re-enter the data again, and simply we should link this sheet to the data sheet. If I click on the 2015 revenue cell, we can see that it has a formula, linking it to the data entry sheet cell I-102. After finish linking the data, I will select the 2 columns that we created and click on Insert. Select the graph that you like because it's your report and you can choose any graph you want. I usually like this one. And then we should rename the graph so we can remember and understand the purpose of this graph if we revisit the report later. So here we go. We found the first trend or indication of UPS performance. It seems that they are doing well, because their revenue is increasing every year during the period we decided to examine. The same process we should do for the other items that we think are worth examining, because these items and their graphs help us to reach the goal out of this report. So designing the report is not just about the presentation part, but also the data that we want to include. The last part is the forecast part. The goal of this part is to forecast how much free cash flow per share the company will generate at the end of a time period, and it's usually 1 year. Every forecast starts with the revenue, and this one requires reading the annual report and taking notes, so we can have a better idea about how the company is making money. And what I mean by that is finding the one thing that without it, the company can't achieve growth in their revenue. For example, Google depends on research and development, so we can find the relation between how much is being spent on research and development and how much revenue is generating. Meta or Facebook revenue depends on the number of users because Meta generates revenue from the ads that they show to each user. Retail companies like Walmart usually depends on their ability to turn over their assets, so we can use the asset turnover ratio. The more annual reports you read, the better you get at identifying these critical factors that the revenue depends on. Once we are satisfied with the forecasted revenue, we should forecast the free cash flow and the outstanding shares. The change of these two items from year to year usually is based on the management policy and strategy, and we don't have real-time access to what is going on the management level, so we can depend on the past performance and trends. For example, if the company is buying back their shares every year, and in the annual report they are saying they will continue to do that, then we can assume that they will buy the same as the average amount for the past few years. The general idea is that we should have a good reason behind every assumption or trend that we will be using in the report. Finally, some people like to create more than one scenario for calculating the intrinsic value, and it's a good idea for the first few reports that you create to measure how different forecasts can change the intrinsic value. Thank you so much for watching this video to the end, and please consider subscribing and liking this video to support this channel.